Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, comprehensive journey through all 10 episodes of Gaurav Srivastava's incredible series, The Cycle and the Surge. We are going to completely dismantle our default Western linear worldview. The idea that progress is just this straight, uninterrupted line going up and to the right forever? Yeah, we're tearing that down. And we're going to replace it with a techno-philosophical synthesis that actually explains how our incredibly complex world really works. There's a quote from the source material that perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. It goes, "The anomaly isn't in reality. The anomaly is in the Western mind." Okay, let's dive into this. For decades, we have been taught that massive disruptions, whether in finance, technology, or society, are just unpredictable anomalies, total freak accidents. But the reality is, this supposed unpredictability is just an illusion. It's an illusion created by our own models because they fundamentally refuse to acknowledge natural repeating cycles. Which brings us to a really vital, almost painful question. Why do we keep getting blindsided by these so-called unpredictable events? Especially right now, we are plunging headfirst into the AI industrial revolution. Why do our modern institutions, places armed with infinite data, literal supercomputers, and thousands of brilliant analysts, consistently fail to predict major systemic crises? We have more visibility, more data than any humans in history, yet we seem to be completely, utterly blind to massive structural reversals. Why is that? To figure that out, we've got a clear roadmap. We're covering 6 distinct chapters today. 1, the Black Swan myth. 2, the curse of Argus. 3, the invention of progress. 4, the prevention paradox. 5, the topology of collapse. And finally, 6, the capital of eras. This is going to take us all the way from abstract philosophy straight into the hard mathematical mechanics.
All right, Chapter 1, the Black Swan myth, predictable chaos.
Let's look at the 2008 financial crisis. Now, the Western view immediately labeled it a black swan anomaly, basically a statistical freak event that no one could have seen coming. But from the Eastern, cyclical perspective, what the author calls the anti-Taleb framework, it wasn't an anomaly at all. It was the totally predictable and inevitable completion of a long-term debt cycle. Calling these disasters black swans, it's honestly an institutional liability shield. Think about it. If it's a black swan, well, nobody's to blame, right? But what looks like absolute chaos to linear thinkers is in reality just profound pattern completion. Chapter 2, the curse of Argus, perfect vision, total blindness. And this brilliantly illustrates our modern predicament. Think of Argus from Greek mythology, the giant guardian with 100 eyes. Argus had perfect, 360-degree surveillance, but he was completely blind to structural frameworks. He couldn't see the big picture and was ultimately defeated by a story. Our modern risk models, they are exactly like Argus. They ingest terabytes of data, but completely miss the underlying cycle. Now contrast that with Cassandra. She had perfect cyclical foresight, but she was totally ignored by her linear society. Today, we're building these massive Argus-like AI models while systematically ignoring the cycle-aware Cassandras standing right in front of us. Chapter 3, the invention of progress, from 1500 to 1800. We have to understand where this blind spot came from. The idea of progress as a continuous upward line wasn't some natural law we discovered. It was literally invented. Back in 1440, the printing press hits and accelerates cumulative knowledge. Then, around 1543, the scientific revolution kicks off, prioritizing method over tradition. And finally, between 1650 and 1800, the Enlightenment officially formalizes progress as this continuous upward ideology. This is the exact historical moment when the West just stopped believing in cycles. They started believing that tomorrow will always mathematically extrapolate from today. Moving on to Chapter 4, the prevention paradox, centralization versus collapse. This is where it gets really counterintuitive. Think of a highly decentralized system like the USA. It constantly experiences frequent, painful little crises, recessions, market crashes, political gridlock. But because it bleeds often, the system learns, it corrects, and it survives. On the flip side, centralized systems, like the historical USSR or the Ming Dynasty, they use their immense top-down power to suppress those small crises. They want to prevent pain, but by doing that, they prevent learning. The pressure just silently accumulates under the surface until, boom, they disintegrate catastrophically and are entirely replaced. So decentralization survives through frequent bleeding, while centralization dies from hidden hemorrhage. Chapter 5: The Topology of System Collapse. Let's look at the four mechanics of why systems actually fail. The first critical variable is truth elasticity. Simply put, this is the maximum distance an uncomfortable truth can travel before the system suppresses it. Imagine a team of software engineers at a massive tech company. They know for a fact their new product launch is going to fail, but the corporate culture is so toxic, they just lie to their VP to survive the week. The elasticity there, it's zero. The system goes totally blind and eventually just crashes into reality. A system's survival is strictly proportional to how far bad news can travel upward without getting buried. The second variable is veto fractality. This is all about the distribution of power across multiple scales. It's the ability of different localized nodes to just look at a bad idea and say no. Systemic resilience actually comes from having multiple independent checkpoints that naturally filter out stupidity. If only one executive or one centralized committee at the very top holds all the veto power, a single bad decision propagates through the entire system with zero resistance, and it absolutely destroys it. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is our third variable, local stress dissipation. This is the rate at which a system allows small shocks to release pressure instead of letting it build up. Think of a modern earthquake-resistant skyscraper. When a small tremor hits, the building is designed to sway. It flexes, it safely releases that kinetic energy. But a totally rigid building, it suppresses those small tremors until the stress accumulates so much that the whole thing snaps during a major quake. For any system to survive long-term, it absolutely must be allowed to safely flex and even fail locally. The final and honestly most terrifying variable is the criticality threshold. This is that invisible point of complexity where small shocks no longer trigger helpful corrections. Instead, they trigger a catastrophic runaway cascade. Below this threshold, a shock makes the system wake up, learn, and stabilize. Above it, a tiny shock triggers an avalanche. And the true horror of this metric is that from the inside, you cannot see criticality until you've already crossed it. As we navigate the immense tension between productivity and distribution in the AI industrial revolution right now, this is the exact threshold we have to be watching. Which brings us to our final chapter. Chapter 6: The Capital of Eras, Actionable Strategy. When it comes to allocating capital, building businesses, or really just planning for the future, there are three distinct worldviews. Type 1 is growth capital. This is that traditional Western linear model we talked about, assuming perpetual upward progress and largely ignoring structural risks. Type 2 is survival capital. This is the doomer mindset, the collapse-focused view that just hoards resources and waits for the apocalypse. But Type 3? That's cycle-aware capital. This is the synthesis. It takes the best of both worlds, combining Western aggressive growth during expansion phases with Eastern cycle awareness to prepare for the inevitable reversals. Without a doubt, this is the ultimate superior strategy for the era we are in right now. So the crucial point is this fundamental equation. Net progress equals growth multiplied by retention minus catastrophic loss. This formula right here, this is the master key for surfing the cycles of the AI industrial revolution. It's not just about maximizing growth. That's the linear trap that leads straight to the curse of Argus. And it's sure as a heck not just about surviving. That's the passive doomer trap. It's about actually surfing the cycles. You maximize generative growth, you retain that value when the cycle inevitably turns, and you structurally design your systems to avoid total wipeout collapse. That is how real lasting progress is actually made. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question to think about. Are you keeping up? Or will reality cross criticality while you're still sitting around arguing about labels? Because as we race toward convergent intelligence by 2030, the systems of the future will not care if you call them East or West, centralized or decentralized. They only operate on hard mathematical topologies. It is time to abandon the old binary illusions, look at the mass, and radically rethink your structural frameworks. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope it leaves you eager to view the world through a completely new cycle-aware lens. Catch you next time.